Secretary for Health says government is considering the use of mainland-style health code. City's COVID cases hover around 3,000 again. Macau residents getting ready for partial lockdown. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. Secretary for Health Lo Cheng-mao said in a TVB program that the government is considering the use of a COVID-19 health code similar to the one used in the mainland and Macau, where the colors red, yellow and green indicate the user's COVID status. This would help to restrict the movement of infected or high-risk residents to protect the majority of the population. Timothy Lee has the story.
With the recent COVID rebound, the government has said it will combat the epidemic by raising the capacity of PCR tests in the city. Speaking during a TVB program, Secretary for Health Professor Lo Cheng-mao discussed the government's thinking on PCR tests, with an emphasis on targeting people working at high-risk areas.
The current direction for the Hong Kong government is to go for more accurate identification and diagnosis of those who are infected. We want to restore the PCR tests because the RAT test alone is not accurate enough.
The health chief said it is highly risky when staff of care homes are able to go to work as long as their RAT results are negative, even if they are feeling unwell. He believes the government may require individuals working in high-risk places to undergo weekly PCR tests on top of a RAT test, eventually requiring them to get tested every 48 hours. Lo added while Hong Kong's strategy to fight COVID should be in line with the mainland, it does not mean a direct imitation.
So I would say some of the good things we'll adopt. For example, a more accurate, precise, rapid PCR test to identify the infected minority and in order to protect the freedom of the uninfected majority.
He said the government may use the red, yellow and green health code used in the mainland and Macau, with green indicating that person does not have COVID, yellow meaning the person resided or visited a high-risk location, and red indicating a confirmed infection or an infected close contact. This would help to restrict the movement of infected or high-risk residents so as to protect the majority of the population. Lo mentioned making the users of Leave Home Safe app use their real names. He also thinks the $200 fee for a PCR test is too high and should be reviewed. On the issue of quarantine-free travel with the mainland as well as overseas, the Secretary for Health believes it is unlikely to happen soon.
So at this point, I don't think quarantine-free travel across the border is a realistic expectation. We understand Hong Kong is an international hub, but we also have to understand that many of the Western countries, they pay a serious price before they come to this point of completely opening the border. And in fact, even for those who have opened the border, they found a surge.
Timothy Lee, TVB News.
Health authorities admit the current COVID vaccination pass that help track high-risk individuals has limitations in actually helping officials find the people who visited infected premises. Some lawmakers are concerned the code may lead to privacy issues. And some experts believe the mainland-style health code must be used in conjunction with other epidemic prevention measures. Dr. Leung Chi-Chiu, a specialist in respiratory diseases, said the implementation of the health code does not mean measures such as COVID tests or quarantine could be avoided. LegCo member Teck Chi-yun is worried the move could mean the government will be able to monitor the daily activities of citizens. The city's COVID-19 infections continue to linger around the 3,000 mark, with another 2,992 cases reported today. Among them, 219 are imported cases and 2 more patients have succumbed to the virus. Hong Kong reported 2,773 locally acquired COVID cases today. 3 residents and a staff member of a care home for the disabled in Shau Kei Wan have been infected. Some 18 residents of the facility were sent to quarantine. 1 student at a special educational needs school in Tai Po has come down with the virus. His family members were previously infected. The student's class has been suspended for a week. Authorities have identified 46 more cases involving the BA.2.1 mutant strain, most of them with an unknown source of infection. Another 9 infections are believed to involve the BA.4 or BA.3 with untraceable sources of infection. The patients live in North Point, Causeway Bay and Tuen Mun. Health authorities noted although there have been an increase in the B8.4 or 5 cases, the proportion among the overall cases in the city remains low. Also, a reminder.
We will monitor the situation. Now, the projection is actually on the basis of the trend, the trajectory over the past week or so. It is likely to go up, but if people are exercising caution and if people are socially distanced themselves and venture out less, the increase will be less drastic.
A 70-year-old and an 85-year-old patient died at public hospitals. Both were residents of care homes and had suffered from chronic illnesses. Meanwhile, Commissioner of Customs and Excise Louise Ho is in isolation after a colleague tested preliminary positive for COVID. She has been listed as a close contact and tested negative using rapid antigen test today. Macau recorded 93 new COVID infections, bringing the total number of cases reported during this latest wave of the pandemic to 1,467. Starting Monday, the public have to stay at home unless they need to buy groceries or take COVID tests. Caleb Leung reports.
On the day before Macau tightens its anti-pandemic measures, people were seen shopping at wet markets and supermarkets to stock up food supplies at home. When the clock strikes midnight Monday, all industrial and commercial premises, including casinos, must stop their operations for 1 week. Wet markets and restaurants can continue to operate, although eateries can only provide takeaways. This Macau resident said the government should do even more and impose even tighter measures to end this wave of the pandemic. But this man said the Omicron variant is common, and even Hong Kong people return to their normal lives when the city still records several hundred cases per day. Macau lawmaker Lei Ching-yi said it is Macau people's common wish to have the pandemic under control so they can return to their normal lives. But she added that although there is a need to tighten anti-pandemic measures to reach the zero COVID target, these measures do affect employment and business operations, therefore the government should offer assistance. The Macau government said after the new measures have been implemented for a week, they can be relaxed if there is a significant reduction in the number of infections. But if the measures appear ineffective, even harsher rules will be put in place. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Quotas for quarantine hotels on the mainland have been switched to drawing lots starting today. The Hong Kong government will also roll out an online booking system this week for nucleic acid testing to avoid crowds from gathering at the border. The move comes as quarantine hotels on the mainland are still fully booked, even after slots have been increased to 2,000 per day due to ticket scalping. Shenzhen authorities announced that starting today, quotas will be allocated by drawing lots. Results will be posted online each night at 8 p.m. Applicants will also be able to see how many quotas are left for the next 6 days. So far, over 14,000 people have applied to cross the border on Saturday. Successful applicants would still be subject to an extra nucleic acid test before crossing the border. Financial Secretary Paul Chan said today the government will streamline procedures to boost land supply. He added it's inevitable that the development process would involve some vested interests, but stressed the government will prioritize the public interest. Chan said on a radio program today that the government will speed up land supply by cutting back some government bureaucracy. He also said he'll make transport and infrastructure available sooner from now on because, according to previous experience, a delay in transport and infrastructure would hold up the process of building flats. The finance chief also quoted a speech by President Xi Jinping on July 1st, who said the central government fully supports Hong Kong to make reforms. Chan said it's important to find courage and identify problems in the process of development. Still ahead on tonight's news. Sri Lankans looks for brighter future as President and Prime Minister promise to resign. More heavyweights are joining the race to become Britain's next Prime Minister. Welcome back to TVB News. Sri Lankans were largely celebrating today after a people power movement forced the country's top two leaders to say they would resign. The president and prime minister are expected to step down within the next few days after being blamed for a crippling economy in which people are struggling to eat or buy petrol for transport. Nazvi Karim reports.
Desperation. Celebration. And violence. Sri Lankans are today picking up the pieces in the aftermath of an extraordinary 24 hours in which tens of thousands of protesters took to the streets of the capital, Colombo. During that time, Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe vowed to resign. And then, the one they were all waiting for, the promised resignation of President Gotabaya Rajapaksa, who in 2009 was a hero to the Sri Lankan people, when, as Defence Secretary, he and his brother, then President Mahinda, ended Sri Lanka's decades-old war against the Tamil Tigers. Now he and his brother are being blamed by many Sri Lankans for the country's worst economic crisis in recent history. With foreign exchange reserves so scarce, the nation cannot afford to import basics such as fuel, food and medicines. On Saturday, protesters stormed his presidential residence in Colombo, where in bizarre scenes they lounge around taking selfies on his beds and made the most of his private swimming pool. Today, his palatial president's office turned into an open house for people who enjoyed a nap, checked out his private gym, or simply lazed around out on the lawn. Rajapaksa's whereabouts were unknown, but reports quoting defense officials say he was not in his office when protesters entered and he is in a safe place. Though the protests were largely peaceful, it turned violent later in the night when a mob set fire to Wickremesinghe's private residence. The Prime Minister was reportedly safe. Meanwhile, opposition politicians were to meet today to agree on a new all-party government to move the country forward, once Rajapaksa and Wickremesinghe officially stepped down. The new coalition was hoping to garner 113 members to show a majority in parliament, at which point they will request Rajapaksa to install the new government and then resign. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
At least 4 more candidates have joined the crowded field of Conservative Party candidates trying to succeed Boris Johnson as British Prime Minister. On Saturday, Transport Secretary Grant Shapps, Chancellor of the Exchequer Nadhim Zahawi and former Ministers Jeremy Hunt and Sajid Javid announced they would be running for the leadership. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss will launch her campaign Monday with the goal of cutting taxes and tackling the cost of living squeeze being felt by many Britons. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has said he won't be running. Several other candidates have also promised tax cuts, putting them at odds with the bookies' favourite, former Finance Chief Rishi Sunak. Conservative officials will meet Monday to set out a timetable for the contest. Ukraine has clashed with Russian forces in the east and south of the country, with 6 civilians killed in one rocket attack. Russian troops were forced to withdraw from Sloviansk, but a cruise missile strike had been launched on the northeastern city of Kharkiv from the Russian side of the border. This was the scene in downtown Kharkiv after the rocket hit buildings. According to preliminary information, an Iskander ballistic missile was probably used in the strike. 6 people were injured. Russian attacks continues in Donetsk, where 6 people were killed. Rockets brought down a 5-story apartment block, trapping at least 30. Meanwhile, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky has dismissed several Ukraine ambassadors abroad, including the envoy to Germany. During Foreign Minister Wang Yi's meeting with U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Indonesia yesterday, Wang urged the U.S. to be cautious in its words and deeds when it comes to Taiwan issues. Blinken said the two sides are committed to managing their relationship and competition responsibly. Caleb Leung has details.
This is the first time that the foreign ministers from China and the United States met face-to-face since October last year. Both sides agreed that the dialogue was substantive and constructive. Foreign Minister Wang Yi said that only by fulfilling the respective commitments in the 3 joint communiques between Beijing and Washington and removing roadblocks in a timely manner will bilateral relations not derail and run out of control. Wang stressed China's solemn position on the Taiwan issue. He demanded the U.S. side should be cautious in its words and deeds and must not underestimate the firm determination of the Chinese people to safeguard territorial sovereignty. Wang also said the United States should remove additional tariffs on China as soon as possible and end unilateral sanctions against Chinese companies. Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken said the two sides are committed to managing their relationship and competition responsibly.
The relationship between the United States and China is highly consequential for our countries, but also for the world. We're committed to managing this relationship, this competition, responsibly.
Blinken also expressed his concerns about China's so-called alignment with Russia. He said he did not think China was behaving in a neutral way because it had supported Russia in the United Nations and amplified Russian propaganda.
Good to see you again.
Aside from Blinken, Wang also met Canadian Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly. Wang said China and Canada have never been rivals but partners, and China has never been a threat but an opportunity. During Wang's meeting with Singaporean Foreign Minister Vivian Balakrishnan, Wang stressed that Hong Kong has restored order, with its people enjoying security and freedom once again. Caleb Leung, TVB News.
Hundreds of people protested for abortion rights in the U.S. by marching to the White House. In Chicago and other cities, March for Life protesters took to the streets.
We're demanding that the federal government do something to legalize abortion now. That waiting till November is not enough.
As we join together to march for life and to send the message that I don't, we don't, women do not believe the lie that we need abortion to have a successful future.
The demonstration in Washington was organized by the Women's March movement. The group has called for a summer of rage in response to the Supreme Court's overturning last month of Roe v. Wade, which had ensured abortion as a constitutional right for more than 50 years. Back locally, the Transport Department has proposed to amend a law making it mandatory for cyclists to wear helmets. Offenders can be fined $2,000. Studies by the government found nearly 90% of fatal and serious bicycle-related injuries involved a cyclist not wearing a helmet. An owner of a bicycle rental shop said only 20 to 30% of her customers would rent helmets, citing the extra cost in buying and maintaining the helmets. Authorities will consult on the amendment at the Legislative Council meeting on Friday. And that's the news for tonight. Thanks for joining us.